Volkswagen Golf changed the way that everyone looks at hatchbacks. However, it's not the only reason that we're looking at it. Let's find out what's going on here. VW Golf also revolutionised the gearbox market, but we need to shoot forward from 1974 when it was released up to 2003. 2003, and VW thought it'd be a great idea to stuff a 3.2 litre VR6 into the front of a Golf and call it the R32. What they also did is implant the first DSG gearbox, which was a DQ250. This was a direct shift gearbox, which was a dual clutch, the first of its kind to be in a production vehicle. The idea was innovated and derived from the Porsche 962 race car from the 1980s. But we're actually here to look at its little brother, the DQ200, which is a dry clutch DSG gearbox, which came out in 2008 and was the first of its kind, weighing only 70 kilo and being a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. So we currently have in Mark 7 Golf 1.4, so it has a dry clutch DQ200. It's currently thudding into reverse. I think we know what the problem is. We're going to take it apart and have a look. A little bit of info about this vehicle. This is a 2016 VW Golf 1.4. Has no fault codes in the system, but it's definitely banging in reverse after some test driving. We believe that means it's going to be mechanical rather than anything electrical or mechatronic based. So we're going to take it apart and have a look. Due to access issues, our techs prefer to drop the subframe to be able to access the gearbox properly. So once the subframe is down, we then drain the oil out of the gearbox. The oil doesn't look terrible coming out of the box, which is good news because it means that the box is probably not burned. So then the drive shafts come out, and then we'll be able to undo the bell housing bolts and start dropping the box out of the vehicle. Once the box makes its trip across the workshop, we can then get into the part that you're all here for, stripping the box down. Once it's down with the builders, the valve body is removed, so you can see the internals of the box. There isn't much spoof in there, which is good news. So the valve body is then taken down to our valve body machine, where it will be tested to see how it performs. This is our valve body testing machine. So the 4 arms that are going in and out are for the gear changes, and then the 2 at the side you can see going in and out. Those control K1 and K2 clutch. So when we look at the results on the screen, pressures are where they should be, which is good news. So as we suspected, not a mech issue. Then the damper plate comes off, and then we get out the DQ200 toolkit, and we can start removing the clutch from the gearbox. Apparently 3rd time's a charm getting it off. Then we remove the bolts from inside the bell housing, remove the clip from the back that holds the gear set into the casing, then we can remove the rest of the bell housing bolts. Then we use the tools again to pull the casing off of the gear set. And there it is, the DQ200 7-speed internal gear set. And there's our issue. The bearings on the bottom of the shift fork for sixth and reverse are completely gone, which will be why it's thudding in and out of reverse. So we're going to remove the rest of the gear set so we can make sure everything is okay with that, and then we'll look at replacing that fork. But the damage was worse than we thought. Not only is it collapsed, but it's come completely separated from the shift fork. And there it is, that's a DQ200 completely laid out. Then we take it over and give it a good wash because of all the clutch dust that is inside the bell housing. And it goes in the hot wash for the sexy steam shot. And that is the new fork. As you can see from the ends, VW have changed the design to stop this issue from happening. So where do we get our parts? So we work in partnership with a company called Autolink Automatics. They're based not too far from our branch in Kent, so I went there to have a look around. Autolink Automatics stock specialist gearbox parts, not just automatics but also manuals. They keep a large stock of parts, clutches, frictions, steels for most gearboxes, parts for power shifts, and they work in partnership with all the big names, so Borg Warner, AC Warner, ZF. They also keep a large stock of DSG clutches and flywheels, which means they have all the parts we need when we need them, which is perfect. Right, let's get back to the action. So due to the redesign of the fork, you have to remove a sleeve. Now these sleeves are very tight, as you can see here done using the puller. If you don't remove these sleeves, you won't get the fork in. So you have to remove these sleeves to be able to actually fit the new designed fork, which actually matches the other two forks that are in the box. Why they didn't put it in there in the first place, I don't know. But there's the old fork next to the new fork, ready to go in the box, so we can get it back to the customer as quick as possible. So now we can start on the reassemble. So these are the two input shafts. Obviously, because it's dual clutch, one connects to one clutch, the other one connects to the other clutch. You have to grease all the bearings and all the shift fork ends, because obviously going in dry is never a good idea. As you can see, it's a very fiddly process getting it back in. These boxes are basically two manual boxes inside one casing, which can make it very difficult to line up all the gears correctly when putting the gear set back into the casing. We use this red silicone because it doesn't degrade with the oil, and we've not found anything better for sealing the boxes, to be honest. So then we can get the back case back on. Then we can get the front and the back bolted back together. Then the drive shaft cup goes in. This is an Allen key that goes right down the middle. And then the clip can go on, securing the gear set and the bearing together in the rear of the case. Then the last few bolts can go in through the front of the bell housing. And all the bolts that secure the front to the back of the gearbox are torqued to spec. This is our technician putting the gearbox in and out of gear. We do this to make sure all the gear shift forks are moving freely and smoothly. So once the valve body goes on, we know there won't be any trouble with the new fork seated in place. Then the all important input seal to stop the oil from leaking. Now, just to make sure there are no leaks, we're going to change all of the sealing rings and gaskets on the Mechatronic unit to make sure that there's no leaks from that part of the box. All the seals we got in a kit from Autolink Automatics. As we say, they keep all this stuff in stock, so the second we saw this box coming in, we ordered it, knew exactly what we needed, and we were good to go. There is a seal under this metal plate of the Mechatronic unit, and if that leaks and gets oil inside, it degrades the gel that holds all the electronic components. And if that happens, you will have Mechatronic failure, which is then a very expensive fix because you'll have to replace the Mechatronic unit with an OEM part from VW. So it's the green seal around the outside is what we're changing. And you can see all the computer boards are covered in a gel. And if that gets contaminated with oil, you will suffer from Mechatronic failure. So that's that seal replaced, so the cover can go back on and get bolted back down. Then we replace a seal around the outside of the mech because that will stop the gearbox leaking. By replacing these seals, it stops the hydraulic fluid from inside the DQ200's Mechatronic unit valve body leaking into the gearbox. Now, the valve body has hydraulic fluid and the gearbox has DCT oil in it. If those mix, you'll suffer from massive issues with it not selecting, juddering, not knowing what gear it needs to be in due to the viscosity differences between the oils. So that's the mech unit being reattached to the valve body of the DQ200. That yellow cap is to measure the shift elements of the valve body, which have to be at 25 millimeters. This is done because it hooks in to the end of the shift forks. Without it being hooked in, it won't select gear. So it goes into those little hooks there. If it's not correctly positioned into those hooks, you will not be able to change gear. So the valve body is bolted down and torqued to spec. We're now onto the clutch. Again, this is a genuine Sachs clutch, came from our friends over at Autolink Automatics. We supplied the VIN number to make sure that this clutch is the correct clutch for this vehicle. These are all the new shims and clutch forks that come in the pack. So you have everything you need to fit that clutch into the box. So what our technician is doing is measuring the shims and laying them out thickest to thinnest, so he knows where to go when it's asking for different size shims. And in goes the first clutch fork, nice and new. Then that will sit from one end on the pivot ball all the way through to the clutch selector out the side of the Mechatronic unit. Then the second selector goes into place. This one doesn't need bolting down, it just pivots between the two. Now for shimming the clutch. With the kit that we have, it has these spacers, and you put them on and measure it using the little fork shaped bit there that slides underneath the lip of the input shaft, and depending on how that slides in and out as to which shim is needed. As you can see, Dan is measuring the shims to see which one will suit for that clutch. That one was slightly too loose, so he'll go for a slightly thicker shim. And then that one's a little bit tighter, so he needs to find a shim between the last one and that one to make sure that the clutch has the correct amount of tolerance in it. And that's how the fork should sit, sliding in and out nice and smooth. Now the clutch can go on. Once the clutch is on, we then move on to another specialist tool. This is to press the clutch down far enough that you can then get a clip on to hold the clutch in place. So Dan is now using his ratchet to push the clutch down over the input shaft, allowing him to get the clip on to hold the clutch in position. Once the clip is on, it's time for the dampening plate. Then that goes in place, and there's another clip that goes on that holds that in position. There are some other measurements that need taking to make sure that this is within tolerance, but I won't bore you with all of that today. And then on goes a new pilot bearing, ready to be fitted into the car. Once the selector is in, we then put the cap on to cover the bearing and the clip that holds the gear set in. Swap out the breather cover for the Mechatronic unit to the actual breather that goes in the vehicle. And now that DQ200 is ready to go back down to the other end of the workshop and be put back into the Golf. It's done, really happy with his work. Now the one job we have left to do before we can get the gearbox in is to change the flywheel. We recommend, if you're changing the clutches in a DQ200, to always change the flywheel. This flywheel was also supplied to us by AutoLink Automatics and the bolts that are now being put in. So once that's put in, we can then get the gearbox in and then we can move on to the next steps. And then that's the gearbox going back in. I won't bore you with the subframe going back on. Then we move on to basic settings. If you're fitting a new clutch, this always needs doing. So we've test driven the vehicle and it has fixed the problem. So that is how you fix the thudding in reverse on a DQ200 and fit a new clutch. If you like this video, like and subscribe, drop us a comment, let us know what you want to see, and see you next week.